Hello guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I am doing a tag video and I love doing these kind of tags because you get a bunch of crazy diverse recommendations and I'm here to give them to you. Today I am doing the bookcase and the bar tag and I was tagged by Nerdy Nat Reads here on BookTube. Thank you so much for tagging me, and I have a glass of champagne while I give you these book recs because all of these book recs are based on drinks. And if you know me, you know I love a good drink, especially because I'm engaged, so I thought a glass of champagne was appropriate. So let's go ahead and get into the prompts. First up, we have Old Fashioned, which is a historical fiction recommendation. And for this prompt, I'm going to be recommending Brother by Anya Alborn. So this is a horror book and it is set in the 70s. Think Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque time. And it follows a family who kidnaps a boy when he's really young and kind of raise him in this family of cannibalistic serial killers. It's very dark, very graphic. There are a ton of trigger warnings. But if you can handle that, it brings some really atmospheric vibes from the 70s, and I love books set in the 70s and 80s. The whole time I was picturing this evil brother character as Billy from Stranger Things because he's so charismatic and witty and cool, but he's also a murderer. I don't know, I was just picturing him and it almost made me sympathetic towards a serial killer because I was like, oh my god, if Billy from Stranger Things came up to me and was putting on the charm, I get taken back to his cabin and murdered too, girl. Ugh. There is this one scene when he's picking up these two girls who, unbeknownst to them, are about to be murdered. One of the girls grabs a bottle of wine and she's like, let me take this to the party. And this genius line, he says,
it ain't a party without a splash of red.
So obviously he means their blood, but also the wine. I'm just he's so witty and charismatic. It also takes place in the South. So Southern 70s vibes. It's that creepy, everything is kind of on the edge, on the precipice of something feeling, and it enhances the horror vibes so much. I highly recommend this book if you like graphic horror. Next up, we have Sidecar, and I'm going to recommend a book with a strong supporting character. So for this prompt, I'm going to recommend Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. And this book has possibly my favorite side character of all time. So this follows Una. This is also a historical fiction because it jumps all around in different times. But we follow our main character, Una, who on her 18th birthday wakes up and she is old. She basically time jumps to a different birthday on the midnight of every single birthday. So she just lives her life, all of her ages, out of order. And as she gets older, she meets this guy named Mackenzie, and he's acting as her little assistant and helping her through as she gets older and helping her adjust and kind of learn about where she is in her life. And their relationship is just so beautiful and wonderful, and I love Mackenzie as a character. He's the kind of assistant that I would want if I was living my life out of order. So I highly recommend this book simply for him, and if you've read the book, then you just know. Okay, it's champagne break. Next, we have Manhattan. Recommend a book that's set in New York City. For this, I'm going to recommend The Dinner List by Rebecca Searle.
There she is.
And this is a more magical realism type of book, but it is set in New York. Our main character walks into her birthday dinner and there's 5 people sitting around a table. And it's the 5 people that she would have dinner with if she could have dinner with any 5 people. You know how you get asked that question,
If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
all the people that she would answer with are sitting around the table at her birthday dinner, and one of them is her ex, and we are kind of taken through their journey together as they're living in New York and kind of experiencing each other and going through trauma, finding out the good and the bad about each other and how they shaped each other's lives. And there's also characters like Audrey Hepburn is at the table, her dad, and all of these people live in New York City. The dinner takes place at like a fancy Italian place in New York, so definitely has that New York atmosphere, but it has substance to it as well. Next up, we have Bloody Mary. Recommend a book that scarred you or messed you up. So when I first read this, I was looking at it as like emotionally scarred, like I'm messed up, dude, I'm crying. But I get that the prompt is like Bloody Mary, like it's probably supposed to be like a graphic horror book. I already recommended one of those, so I'm gonna take it the more emotional route and recommend Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I cried like 8 or 9 different times throughout reading this book. It took me on an emotional roller coaster. This is another historical fiction. I don't know why I have so many historical fiction recs, but this one is so good. It is so emotional. It will rip your heart out and make you cry, and then you'll be angry, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll be like, like it's just so many emotions while you're reading this book. I don't even want to tell you what happens. You don't need a synopsis. Please just go read it. Go in knowing nothing and let it take you on a ride. Next up, we have Espresso Martini. Recommend a book that had you reading into the night. And for this prompt, I'm gonna recommend Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. Y'all know Lisa Jewell is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I absolutely love her domestic thrillers set in the UK. They're just so mysterious, and I love trying to piece together the clues and having them all come together at the end. So I definitely stayed up until like 2 or 3 in the morning to finish this book because I just had to know what happens. We follow the disappearance of a teenage girl named Sapphire from the perspective of people in her family, her therapist, her friends, people in the neighborhood who knew her, a teacher, and they're all kind of tangentially related to each other. So seeing all of those points of view come together and solving the mystery of Sapphire and her disappearance was so satisfying, and I just had to stay up to get to that satisfying moment. If you haven't read Lisa Jewell, what are you doing on this channel? Do you live under a rock? Go do it now. Next up, we have a Sazerac. Never had that drink before, can't say that I've heard of it, but the prompt is to recommend a book that left you disoriented. So for this prompt, I'm gonna recommend Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller that's all about alternate realities. It kind of is giving me interstellar vibes, and it's super fast-paced. If you're looking for something to pull you out of a reading slump, this is it. It goes by super fast, and the audiobook is really well done, so I highly recommend that as well. Basically, we're following this guy who gets kidnapped and transported into another world where he is himself, but kind of in a different outcome. Like if he would have made slightly different decisions, then this is how his life would have ended up. And he kind of travels through the alternate realities and tries to get back to his destination, his home reality. It is thrilling, it is crazy, and it is definitely disorienting with all the different reality shifting. The next prompt is hilarious. It is Long Island Iced Tea. Recommend a book that is doing too much. And I hate Long Island iced teas. I just think they're absolutely disgusting. I throw up every time I drink one. And I almost threw up when I read this book because it is doing way too much. And that is The Minders by John Mars. This book takes place in the same universe, kind of like the minute into the future kind of sci-fi as The One and the Passengers by John Mars, and I absolutely loved those books. So I'm so disappointed to say that I hated the follow-up, The Minders. This concept was just trying to do way too much, and it ended up feeling really confused, and I didn't know what storyline to follow. I didn't know which one to care about. I really didn't care about any of it, and I'm not even going to tell you what this is about because you shouldn't read it. Moving on. Cameron's home. I'm drinking champagne at 3 in the afternoon.
Why?
For my video.
Why do you need champagne for the video?
I got tagged in an alcohol-related video. Don't my friends know me so well? The next prompt is Negroni. Not sure what that is. Another drink that I've never heard of in my life. But the prompt is to recommend a book with a love triangle. So this is not necessarily a traditional romance, but there is definitely a love triangle, and that is Layla by Colleen Hoover. This book is so haunting. Talk about disorienting. This is another book that would go for the disorienting prompt as well, because it is basically a love triangle between a guy, his girlfriend, and a ghost. So basically, to give you a little synopsis, our main character meets the love of his life at this beautiful, sprawling bed and breakfast. It's in the country, it's aesthetic, it's cute, and they fall in love, and then our main female love interest ends up going through a really traumatic event. So our main male love interest takes her back to that bed and breakfast to try to reconnect with her, bring her back, and it ends up being haunted. And instead of connecting with his girlfriend, he connects with a ghost, and they're kind of competing for his affection, and he is very conflicted between them. It is one of the craziest books I have ever read, and I highly recommend it, ? I don't know if this book would be for everyone, but it was definitely for me. The next prompt is Bay Breeze. Recommend a book with light, chill, heartwarming vibes. So for this, I am recommending Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. This is an adorable romance that is like light, hate to love, more like got off on the wrong foot to friends to lovers, which I think is really adorable. There's a lot of romance around like old people because it takes place at an old folks home, and there's also very heartwarming vibes around endangered turtles that live at this retirement center. So it's very adorable, very heartwarming, not too smutty, but a really emotional romance for you to get invested in. So I highly recommend it. The next recommendation, y'all are probably sick of hearing me talk about this book, but it is Dark and Stormy. Recommend a book that's dark, thrilling, and menacing. So for this prompt, yet again, I'm taking the opportunity to talk about Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This is one of my new favorite books of all time. It is a crazy thriller. It is super dark, super thrilling, and will keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. We are following two different timelines. We're following our main character in the present day as she gets convicted for aiding and abetting the murder of her high school best friend. And then we're also following our same character back in the day, right in the days leading up to her best friend's disappearance and murder. So along the way, we're finding out how she was involved in this. And then we're also following her trial, her going to jail, and the aftermath after she's released when copycat killings start happening right after her release. So people are suspecting her. It is super intense, super thrilling. Jennifer Hillier and her thriller writing has a really specific way of like revealing what is happening about a paragraph before it's actually said, like in writing. So you have this dread of knowing that this really horrible, dark thing is happening, but it's not expressly revealed to you until right after you find out. So it's like your worst fears are immediately being confirmed. It is so haunting, so crazy. Those last few chapters, my mind was blown. I couldn't read fast enough. It was so thrilling. I highly recommend this book. Again, if you think you would like Brother, you would definitely like Jar of Hearts. These two are definitely similar in the way that they are both kind of having that historical element while still being super thrilling as well, because the flashback scenes in Jar of Hearts take place in the like late 90s, early 2000s, and those vibes are very fresh and nice. It's very like get a Slurpee at 7-Eleven and eat some candy hearts. So if you like those vibes and you like dark graphic thrillers, this one's for you. But again, make sure to look at the trigger warnings if you are sensitive to any type of graphic content. And finally, our last prompt is a martini, and I am supposed to recommend a classic for you. So I decided to go with my favorite underrated classic that I feel like very few people talk about, but it's actually one of my favorite books of all time and one of the books that got me back into reading and really inspired me in my career. If you don't know, I am a therapist, and so this book really means a lot to me, and that is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This follows the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and we are seeing kind of all the different mental health effects that are taking place that are kind of being ignored. So we are following a veteran who is obviously suffering from PTSD very severely, but there's not a name for it, and there's kind of no acceptance for seeking treatment for it. Therapy is very stigmatized, so it's referred to as shell shock throughout the book, and it's very haunting and uncomfortable and emotional. As you're reading it, you're also reading about his wife who is dealing with depression, and it also has really strong commentary on feminism with the discussions of the wife as well. So if you're at all interested in reading a classic that's actually really gripping and interesting, reading about really great mental health rep, and reading a really thought-provoking story, I highly recommend Mrs. Dalloway. All right, guys, that is gonna be all for today's tag video, today's recommendation video, all of that. Again, thank you so much, Nat, for tagging me in this video, and I'm gonna tag a bunch of people on the screen and linked down below right now to do this tag. I hope you do it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss my next one, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.